Dear friends, today is 12th September. This is Tuesday mindfulness group session where we walk for 45 minutes and sit for 45 minutes and then engage in the supportive factor session. Supportive factor, as you should be able to remember, we will have to support this practice as the Blessed One has recommended, and that is what we are doing. There are 5 things with which we have to support. Of those 5 things, this time is allocated for 2 supportive factors, which we call listening supportive factor and the discussion supportive factor. So for this purpose, we have selected the Relay Chariot Discourse. In Pali, we call it Ratha Vinita Sutta. And the particular verse recited in Pali is talking about purity of the virtue, purity of morality, is simply for the sake of purity of mind. Right? Sila Visuddhiyava Deva Chitta Visuddhatta. Purity of virtue is for the purity of the mind. So how did this discussion take place, or how it happened? Was it's a dialogue between 2 great arahants, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Punnamantana. And they did not organize the discussion as we are organizing this session. It is all by chance. It happened accidentally. It is because of a thought that arose in the mind of Venerable Sariputta when he heard about Venerable Punnamantana. He thought it's a good idea to have a chat to this particular monk because his disciples are so happy with him. They are so satisfied with him. So it will be very beneficial for Venerable Punnamantana if I mention this fact to him. So he wanted to meet Venerable Sariputta, but it was just a thought, and he never planned when to do it or how to do it. But one day, Venerable Punnamantana met the Blessed One, and then Venerable Sariputta heard that Venerable Punnamantana has visited Blessed One, and as soon as he heard, he rose from his seat and took the sitting cloth and ran behind him in search of him. And then he was able to see Venerable Punnamantana was walking far away, and he just after that quietly walked behind him, not very close, but not too far as well, keeping a distance so that he can just see his head, right? Because it may not be just flat land, as in Australia, it may be hilly. So therefore, he ensured that he always sees his head, right? So Venerable Punnamantana went to a jungle nearby, which we call Amdavane, and in that forest, he was resting after lunch. And then even Venerable Sariputta rested in the same jungle or same forest. And after they got up from the rest, they started having a chat. So that is how this discussion started. And Venerable Sariputta, who is the second-hand man of the Blessed One, is asking Venerable Punna, are you living this holy life under the Blessed One? Then Venerable Punnamantana says yes. Then he's asking all these questions just to give this message not for Venerable Punna, not for Venerable Sariputta, to give this message for us, for those who do the practice after they are gone, right? So therefore, that discussion that happened that day is still paving the way to the practitioners, or the practitioners are able to understand what's happening in the practice, what is happening through the practice. So that is how he's presenting the questions, as if interviewer of a well-known TV channel asking questions is asking, Venerable Sariputta is asking questions from Venerable Purnamata. So what are the questions he's asking? He's asking, are you living this holy life for the purity of virtue? And he's asking whether he's living the holy life for the purity of the mind. And he's asking whether the holy life is lived for the purity in terms of view. And he's asking purity in terms of whether the holy life is lived for the purity in terms of overcoming perplexity. And he then asks whether the holy life is lived for the purity in terms of knowledge and vision of what is not, what is and what is not the path. Then he's asking further, goes and asks whether he's living the holy life for the purity in terms of knowledge and vision of the way. Then he's asking again another question, whether he's living this life for the purity in terms of knowledge and vision. For all these questions, I just ran through all of them at once, but these questions were asked individually, and Venerable Punna was answering individually with just one word, no. So for all the questions, the answer was no. Then it was not puzzling for Venerable Sariputta, but for us, when we are reading, that suspicion, that curiosity is created, whether he was not aware. Of course, he was aware. But as I said earlier, he's asking these questions for the benefit of the followers, right? So when he said no, Venerable Sariputta is asking, then why are you living the holy life? Right. Then Venerable Punna says, I am living this holy life for the sake of total unbinding through the lack of clinging, which means when we live, we are clinging to so many things. In summary, we are clinging to what do you call, name and form, or we are clinging to the 5 aggregates, right? So 5 aggregates are form, feelings, perceptions, mental volitions, and the consciousness. So I'm not going to go into details of these things. At some point in the future, we will be able to go through these things. And if someone is interested to know more about these things, we have discussed these things in our 4 foundations of discourse discussion. So you can listen to that. Chatu should be able to help there, that is available. However, the clinging is referring here is clinging to our physical process and mental process, to put it in simple terms. So he says, I am trying to get rid of this clinging. He is not using the word get rid of. He says lack of clinging, right? So he loses it, and total unbinding. Now we are tangled and in so many ways to physical and mental process. So he says to get rid of that tanglement, to create unbinding to the physical and mental process, I am living this holy life. So we call it in Pali Anupada Parinirvana, right? So there is no particular term in English to explain Anupada Parinirvana. So they have coined this statement or coined this phrase to explain it for the sake of total unbinding through lack of clinging. And that is why the holy life is lived according to Venerable Punnamantani Putta, which is the teaching of the Buddha. But Buddha is also asking us to follow this path to have this total unbinding through the lack of clinging, to reducing clinging, to depreciating clinging, to minimizing clinging. And once that answer was given, Venerable Sariputta is asking the same set of questions and relate it to total unbinding. He is asking whether purity in terms of the mind, a total unbinding. He is asking whether purity in terms of view, total unbinding. He is asking whether purity of overcoming perplexity is total unbinding. And similarly, is the knowledge and vision of what is not and what is the path is total unbinding. Is knowledge and vision of the way total unbinding? Is knowledge and vision a total unbinding through lack of clinging? Again, when he asked these questions, Punnamantani Putta again very quietly, very calm manner, he says, "No, my friend." Right? So Venerable Sariputta knows that the answer is no, but still he is asking the question so that now it is very clear for us, those who are following after 2,600 years. These things have happened, so we have no doubt. Now, what we should do, we should not have these questions now when these things are answered in this manner. Then the Venerable Punnamantani Putta says, I will give you an example. In that example, he says, if suppose the king of the country, who is those days King Pasenadikosara, is going somewhere for an urgent business matter from the state where he is living, Savatthi, to Saketa, and that is a long way, and you can't just use one chariot. You will have so many. Suppose that he is using 7 chariots. So he's from one chariot he goes to one town, and then from there he's going to the third, and from the third he goes to the fourth. Likewise, he keeps on going, and he goes to his destination. Once he reaches the destination, the king, or once he's received at the destination, if someone is asking, "Did you come this whole journey from this chariot or the 7th one?" Then the answer is no. Whether it's the 6th one, answer is no. Whether it's the first one, answer is no. So the whole journey was not done in one chariot, but you can't say that it was not useful as well. So therefore, Venerable Punna now says, all these things that you are asked, correct, but it is not in itself, the journey. It is not in itself is the total unbinding. It is not in itself the total purification. One leads to the other, and that leads to the other, and that leads to the other, and likewise it's a path, right? So therefore, in this discourse, we have very beautiful dialogue, how our practice purifies each of these stages. And last time when we met, we discussed the purification of virtue. If I give a small summary about it, by virtue, what we mean is that restrainment of physical and verbal restraint. So in physical and verbal restrainment, the lowest point or the bottom line is the 5 precepts. We refrain from, as we recited at the time when we started the session. We determine not to kill, not to steal, not to engage in sexual misconduct, not to engage in bad speech or incorrect speech, or avoid intoxicating drinks and drugs, right? So that's the bottom line. And from there onwards, all these precepts that are going up to 220 odd for monks and 300 odd for nuns start, right? So in this, that's virtue has to be purified. When we say virtue has to be purified, it's something that we have to be careful. Virtue is not in itself something that has to be 100% completed and 100% corrected. It is something not possible. So if you try to completely avoid killing, then simply you can't live. And that virtue itself becomes, the beginning itself becomes the end. So the Blessed One therefore says it has to be purified, means it should not be a burden to you. The virtue has to be adhered to in such a manner and for the purpose of getting to the next stage. You take the first step, not to stay there, but to go to the second step. So therefore, purification of virtue means you are not taking that as a burden. You are not trying to perfect it from doing 100%. Right? So therefore, we discuss a lot of things. And when you become more and more virtuous, and you will afraid of you, and they will not have any fear of your action. So since you are not making others afraid of you, and you in return will get the same thing. You will also get no fear. And the no fear that you get is, you have no fear that your inner mental process is not hating you. But if you steal, if you kill, if you engage in incorrect speech, if you have sexual misconduct, if you take intoxicating drugs, and within you, you will have self-hatred because you are doing something bad and your mental process is bad. Your mental process is having negative vibrations, negative energy. So therefore, you will have some sort of self-hate. So you don't have that fear when you observe the precepts. And similarly, there is no fear from others also. They will not blame you, saying that you are a murderer or a liar or a womanizer or anything like that. And at the same time, you have no fear that a king will catch you and put in the jail, or the police will catch you and give a charge sheet to you because you don't do anything bad. And finally, you have no fear that you will not have a bad destination after that, right? So you receive all these, you avoid all these fears. You will have no fear of these things. And how does this happen in your practice? We discussed whenever in your 45 minutes of walking and 45 minutes of sitting, and you didn't do any of these things intentionally, willfully. Maybe when you're walking and may have died, but you haven't killed, right? It is not your thinking, or it is not your intention to kill an animal. So therefore, in this 1.5 hours, your virtue will become 100% purified. You will be able to get more and more peace in your existence. So that is why I have heard in the past, most of you would like to come to the temple and practice, because it provides that positive energy, and that is mainly and initially coming from this simple practice. of walking and sitting. Maybe you have not been able to see any details of your walking process. You may not have been able to see any details of your sitting process, or say what happens when you are sitting. But still, even none of those have happened. You have perfected your virtue in this 1.5 hours. So this gives a very good point that it is not compulsory for you to be virtuous before you come. You may have done some nasty things before you come here, but once you come here, you have the opportunity to purify yourself for 1.5 years or 1.5 hours. And when you see that you have an alternative way of living in this manner, when you go from here, at least you will have the intention, I should continue this practice. I should extend this practice to my normal life. So therefore, the path the Blessed One is explaining, or the path the Blessed One is producing to the world, is not to stone the sinner. He's giving a helping hand to all of us, because all of us are sinners. We have done nasty things, so many nasty things, but he never says, you cannot be purified, get lost. He says, come on board and do so many hours of walking, so many hours of sitting during those times. And when you practice the whole time, what initially happens is you get perfected in your virtue. So that is what we discussed last time. And if I start talking more, we get bogged down in the same thing once again. So today we are going to talk about the other side of the coin. It says purification of virtue is for the sake of purification of mind, right? So now we are going to talk about the purification of mind, which we call Chitta Visuddhi, right? So when someone is having the purification of virtue, purification of virtue in itself is the purification of the mind. You should be able to remember the story we discussed the week before last, and there was a discussion between Brahmin and the Buddha. And after the discussions, their conclusion was, anyone who is wise will be virtuous. Anyone who is virtuous will be wise. If you are not virtuous, you won't be wise. If you won't be wise, you won't be virtuous. That was the conclusion. So therefore, if someone is observing precepts, if someone becomes virtuous in thought moments when you practice, and that itself is the change in the mind, is a change, purification of the mind. So that is just the start. And by observing precepts, by become virtuous, what we eliminate or we depreciate some defilements, and those defilements are known as transgressional defilements. So you know what transgressional is? The defilements, once you do it, everyone in the world will know. It will go in the Facebook, it will go in newspapers, it will go in TV, it will go in Instagram, it will go in everywhere, and everybody will know, oh, so and so has done so and such thing, right? So therefore you can't just hide it. So when it comes to transgressional defilements, there are basically 3 ways of observing these transgressional defilements. One is some people make determination, I won't be killing, I won't be stealing, and so on and so forth. And some people become virtuous, not as much of determination, but since they keep on practicing, this virtue is coming into their life. The best example is you guys. So when you have been practicing for some time, and I have seen when you talk and you are talking more about being moral than what you are. So that's a practical way of become virtuous, practical way of maintaining morality. And the other way of become virtuous is because of the rules and regulations of the particular belief. So these are the three ways that you can be virtuous. So irrespective of how you become virtuous, when you are being virtuous, leads to the surfacing of another defilement, which we call obsessional defilements. Initially, by restraining our physical deeds and verbal deeds, we avoided transgressional defilements. So when the transgressional defilements are controlled, if I may use the word, it is not a controlling as such, it is, let me say, managed, then another defilement that you have not seen in the past will manifest, will surface, right? It will come from, it will come to the surface level, surface layer. And that is called the obsessional defilements, right? So these obsessional defilements, the Pali term for obsessional defilements is Pariuttana keles, right? Pariuttana keles means, obsessional defilements means, if I give you the difference between transgressional and obsessional defilements, transgressional, you know that you have done something bad, and another third party, at least one more third party will know, right? You have killed someone or killed some animal or stolen something, sexual misconduct, whatever, another person will know, even if not the whole world, right? But in the case of obsessional defilement, nobody else will know. Only you will know obsessional defilements, right? And they are the Pariuttana keles, or the obsessional defilements. And we also call it hindrances in the practice. And what are these hindrances? There are 5 hindrances or 5 obsessional defilements. They are called sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, anxiousness and worry, and skeptical doubts. So these are the obsessional defilements. So how do they arise? They arise because your physical and verbal restraint. You don't do anything bad physically. You don't do anything bad verbally when you are doing your walking practice, when you are doing your sitting. So those doors are shut. But the mind is not shut. Mind is open. So the mind is asking you, get up and go and get involved in sense pleasure. So telling for you to get up and go, telling for you to stop and go is not the sense pleasure. It is the sense desire, right? So you have the image of the sense pleasure within you that manifests, that surfaces. And how you say when you are practicing is, I get so many thoughts. So many thoughts means things that you have seen, things that you have listened to, things that you have tasted, things that you have had contact with, things that you have smelled, or things that you have been thinking about. All these images, although it's not the real thing, you don't go and see anything, you don't go and listen, but your need, your mental urge to go and see them is coming up. And that is called sensual desire. And similarly, for some people, they may not have sensual desire, but they may have ill will. They will remember that particular person, and they create a whole horror movie while walking and while sitting, because that ill will towards that particular person or for that particular group of people or something, maybe some incident, you will generate anger, hatred within you. So you are not really going and fighting and killing and bombing, but that boiling inside, you can see. When can you see? Only when you have restrained your verbal and physical activities. If you are engaged in verbal physical activities, you can't see the mind. So this is why it is a part. The Blessed One is using this physical restrainment, using the physical activity of walking and physical activity of observing the breath. He's gradually linking to the mind. He's digging a tunnel to the mind. So some layers of the mind is surfacing. These are the things that we have had in the mind. And these are the things that have been energizing our physical and verbal activities. So long as you are engaged in physical and verbal activities, you won't be able to see the mind. Now you see the mind, right? And the next thing is, if you don't have sensual desire, if you don't have ill will, because there will have people who are not very much involved in sense desire and ill will. And for them, it is sloth and torpor, right? They will feel very lethargic, they will feel very sleepy, and they will just fall down while sitting. And for some others, it may not be sloth and torpor. They may be very anxious about what is next, what is next, what is next, what is happening in the future. And or it may be worrying about what has happened in the past. So I should have started this so many years ago, and I have lost so many years of my life and all that. So that is because of that is another defilement that you have in the mind. Then only you will know. So therefore, it is an obsession in the mind. So therefore, we call it obsessional defilement. These are how the whole humanity works. And although this is how the whole humanity works, 99.9% of the humanity is not aware of it. Only people like us who are practicing mindfulness will be able to see this. I'm repeating that. Only people who are practicing mindfulness or leaning towards mindfulness will be able to see this. Just because you meditate, you may not see these things. And when I say may not see these things, what I mean is that you will not experience this. And a lot of meditators don't allow these things to come up. They suppress it. But Blessed One, don't suppress. Just open the lid and ask us to see the junk in the septic tank. So these are the things that you see on the first layer of the septic tank, right? So the last obsessional defilement is skeptical doubts, which means you don't have anything else, but the mind is trying to create doubts about your practice. Mind is trying to create doubts about Buddha. Mind is trying to create the doubt about the path, which is the Dhamma. Mind is trying to create doubt about whether there was Venerable Sariputta, whether there was Punnamantaniputta, whether there were Arahants, or whether this particular teacher is capable of teaching. And all those doubts will come, and he may not be good enough, and he can't explain properly. And this is not how it should be done. And all sorts of nonsense will come to your mind. And that's again another defilement, right? So these are the five obsessional defilements or hindrances. If I may mention once again, sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, anxiousness and worry, and skeptical doubts. So Blessed One is giving an analogy of these things using water. He says sensual desire is like colored water. Because the water is colored, you will not be able to see it properly, see the bottom properly. And ill will is like boiling water. Since the water is boiling, you won't be able to see properly through the water, and you won't see what is underneath. And the other one is sloth and torpor is mossy. water, which means moss is on the water, so therefore you can't see it well. And anxiousness and worry is like rippling water. So a lot of waves are there. Since waves are there, you can't again see water properly. And then skeptical doubt is muddy water. So it is again getting dirty because of the doubt. So therefore you won't be able to see the bottom of the water. So these are the what do you call obsessional defilements. So when you how they arise while practicing, it is important for us to now see why this is happening. And why it is happening, one reason is because we restrain our physical and verbal activities and the mind is surfacing. And the other reason is mind is losing food to run its usual sequence. So how mind is running is giving command to the physical layer, giving command to the verbal layer. But the mind is giving command, but there is no one to receive it. And since you start seeing the mind is so busy, but there is no one taking this job. There is no one taking the order. So that is why these things are coming up. So when you either determine to observe precepts or meditate, you should be aware that obsessional defilements will raise their head. Right? So when they raise their head, people observe precepts. Therefore, not for the sake of observing precepts. When you observe precepts, especially when you practice, you should know that you are observing precepts. And since you're observing precepts, you should know that observation of precepts leads to the testing of the next layer of defilements. That is obsessional defilements. In other words, obsessional defilements is the confirmation that you are purifying your virtues. So this is a very nice link. If you have obsessional defilements, if you have a lot of sensual desire, if you have a lot of ill will, if you have sloth and torpor, if you have skeptical doubts, if you are anxious and worried, which means now your purification of virtue is complete. You have passed one test. If your virtue is not purified, if your physical and verbal restrainment has not happened, then you won't be able to see this. So although we see these things as negativities, there is a bright light. There is a silver line in the dark cloud. So it's not all bad. It says that you are going forward. You are progressing. So when you are progressing, then the next thing is you will have to purify the mind. You will have to purify the obsessional defilements. The purification of obsessional defilements, or which we know as hindrances, is the next challenge. So how does this happen? When we practice is something that we have got to discuss. So when you say, for example, after work, or when you are walking, or when you start walking, you can't bring your mind at all to your walking process. So what you do is maybe you start labeling your walking process. When you are walking, when the right foot is moved, you say right, 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 and you say left, 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 left. right, 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 left, left, left. And then you bring your mind through the verbal process or through labeling, you bring your mind to the physical activity, which is walking. Or the same thing can happen even in your sitting, right? So as soon as you sit, your attention will not straight away go to your breath, right? It may take some time. So if it is not taking, maybe you will be labeling when you are breathing in. You may be labeling in, and when it is going out, you may be labeling out, 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 out. So that way, you divert your attention to what is happening in this particular point in time. Suppose you were successful, you are able to observe, you were able to exactly label from the point the right leg was lifted up to the point you place your right leg on the floor, and similarly the left, and you keep on doing and without missing anything. So in that situation, or when you observe your breath, when you label your breath, you from the start of the in-breath, you are labeling, and from the start of the out-breath, you are labeling, and your attention is completely with the breath. So when this happens, since you are completely with what is happening in this particular point in time, your attention is not with the sense pleasure, your attention is not with any of the hindrances as well. Your attention has completely come to the object that you are supposed to observe, right? And so then you feel this situation or this observation or this attention is much more peaceful. So when it is much more peaceful, you feel more and more happy, you get more and more rapturous mind, and then you keep continuously observing. So when you continuously keep observing it, what happens is you completely move away more and more and more, moving away from the sensual world as well as the hindrances. So therefore, for the purification of the mind, one thing that happens is you will be able to observe the object. When you observe the object, when your attention is with the object, your mind is completely purified. No hindrances at all, right? So you may have you may have seen one step, or you may have seen two steps, but in those short moments, you have completely purified your mind. So if this one step becomes two, two becomes four, four becomes six, six becomes 5 minutes, 5 minutes become 10 minutes, then you gradually extend the duration within which you keep your mind purified. Similarly, when you are doing your sitting practice, your attention is more and more and more and more with the in-breath and out-breath. Your mind is getting purified, right? Then someone is able to question this, or someone is able to challenge this. So if the mind is with the object, sometimes although we have the mind with the object, sometimes you hear sounds, sometimes you feel pain, sometimes you get thoughts, sometimes especially when you are walking, there are visuals, right? So when those visuals are there, you can't say that I'm 100% with the object. I'm not 100% with the object. I see the other things as well. I feel the other things as well. That is true. So therefore, he may argue that my mind is not purified. So this is a very good scenario to see whether your mind is purified or not. Right now, here what has happened is true. You not only have just the object, you have the secondary objects as well. But But although you have the secondary objects, you are just aware that they are there. You are not declaring war with them, right? So therefore, if you are able to observe not just the main object, and if you are aware of the other ancillary subsidiary objects are also appearing, but still you are unhindered, your mind is even more purified, right? So before Buddha, to purify their mind, or not to purify their mind, they thought their mind were purified, just maintaining the main object, which is breath, or walking, or whatever the other thing they have been doing, but maintaining that object all the time. But what Buddha did was let other variables come into the equation and see whether you will be able to survive without much shivering, without much shattering, without much vibration, without much shock. And that is what he is teaching through keeping the mindfulness to the fore. So when you keep the mindfulness to the fore, you see the main object, you see the other things as well, but you are neither liking the main object nor disliking the other variables that are coming into the same. So in that manner, you don't suppress any hindrances. You check when other variables are coming. Now you have an opportunity to test whether you still have sense desire, whether you still have ill will, whether you are still anxious, whether you are still worrying, whether you are still doubting the practice. And that is why the other variables are coming. That is why the Blessed One says, keep the mindfulness to the fore and see whether you are able to withhold them or, or face them. So that is what we are doing. So when you have other variables, instead of complaining about them in your report, if you are able to say, I just observed them, and when I observed, this sound came and it really hit my eardrum, and I felt my eardrum like this. I was just observing it, and then it vanished. Once it vanished, my attention once again came to the breath. And when the attention came to the breath, I felt my tummy was going up. So which means your attention is completely continuing. And only thing happens is the objects that are coming to the attention are changing, but you are not affected by any of those things. So therefore, this keeping the mindfulness to the fore is giving you an opportunity to see whether you still have the hindrances, the obsessional defilements. And there is another beautiful side to this. So when this happens, then you will be feeling that you have a much better alternative to your life. Now, when you are not affected by the things that are happening around, even at your work, even in your family, there are so many chores happening. There are so many things that are happening. It's like, like a market. Sometimes there is no order at all. But even when you go to a place like that, you will be able to stay calm, right? So you may start liking this calmness. You may start liking this peacefulness, right? So you may get addicted to that. The happiness, the rapture that arises from the practice, you may start liking. And that, if that happens, and that usually happens because now you are having a better alternative to live. So when you have a better alternative to live, naturally you will start liking it. There is nothing wrong. But over time, you should be able to see that as well, that you are liking such situations, or when such situations are disturbed, the anger, hatred is arising within you. So therefore, once you start seeing these things without getting affected by them. All what you see is nothing but it's a phenomena, right? When something happens, you will be able to see your liking is generated within and you observe it. Now you don't complain about it. You have the peace of the mind. You have the sharpness of the mind instead of getting overpowered by that sense desire or the ill will that comes up. Your mind is now quiet and sharp enough to see that it is coming up. You don't try to stop it. You let it come. So when you observe, when you allow it to come and when you observe, it loses its strength. And then you see it comes and keeps for some time and comes to surface and looking for physical and verbal reaction, and there is no physical and verbal reaction, it gradually fades and then completely goes away. And then another thing comes up. Then you keep observing. So when you get used to this mindfulness to the fore, the observation technique, all what happens is you keep observing, and these things have never gone. These things are still there. Sense, pleasure, ill will, sloth, phantom, all this nonsense will be there. But now your attitude towards them have changed. So when your attitude changes, that's all what matters. Buddha is teaching you to change ourselves rather than changing the world. So that is the path. And that is how the mindfulness or the four foundations of mindfulness is teaching you to overcome or to purify the mind. So just because of the practice, you observe the precepts naturally, and once you observe the precepts naturally, and the observation of precepts is confirmed by the appearance of hindrances or the obsessional defilements, and when you have the obsessional defilements, you take the very same thing as your focal point, as the thing that you will have to be mindful, and you become mindful of them. Then you will be able to go through them. Once you go through them, your attention will either come to the object, or you will start simply seeing that these are just shifting from one to the other. Nothing but you will have to do only observation. So this practice is therefore is something that anybody will be able to do, because this is how the entire humanity works. So therefore this is not Buddhism. This is simply not even humanism. The humans can do. Therefore it's something of the humans. But this is how even the entire animal world works. But we are fortunate enough that we have this technique, we have a way of communicating it, we have a way of practicing it, we have a way of experiencing it. So therefore, I request all of you to make use of this wonderful human life to overcome these shackles in the mind and purify your mind. By purifying your mind, go to the next layer of purification. May it be so, and may you all be well, happy, and peaceful. With that, I will conclude my talk. Everyone, Sarana.
Thank you, Bhante.
Right. Okay, we have about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. If anyone is having any point of discussion. Hi, Zach.
Take him on my lap. It's so strange. I'll go and come to the front. Hello.
How are you?
Quite good.
You don't like us.
I don't what?
You don't like us.
Oh no, I don't like myself.
Fair enough.
So the first thing that I'd like to say is that I'm a really bad listener. So I've never been a good listener. It's not something that comes naturally to me. I much prefer to speak all the time. And you know, out of this practice, I find the walking, that's not too bad, but I'm often thinking, oh, I wonder if I'm the best walker or something, or something like that. And then the sitting's not too bad. But then the listening I find especially difficult. It's kind of like, it winds me up. Like I feel like wound up, like, oh, having to listen. Oh, when's it my turn? That's how I feel. So what's your response to that?
That's how we identify our individual characteristics, right? Some people, especially in Sri Lanka, they are very good listeners. They listen. Bana, we call this preaching or sermons, we call Bana. And every channel in Sri Lanka is, they are having some sermon. And every radio channel is having some sermon. And a lot of people are listening. So in Sri Lanka, they are better listeners. And having said that, not everybody. And when you know that you are a bad listener, knowing that you are a bad listener in itself is good or bad.
That's a good thing. It's better than not knowing.
Yeah. So if you know that you don't know, it's the wisdom. But what happens in the world today, they don't know, but they claim they know. That's what is happening in the world. So therefore, Einstein was defeated by somebody else, and he was defeated by somebody else. So everyone gets defeated. All the scientists have been disproven by another scientist. That is because they claim they know. Right? So knowing that we don't know is we are on the path. We are innocent. And we accept that there is more to learn. Right? So identifying individual characteristics is therefore an advantage that we have by being mindful honestly. And I had this issue. I'm in the same boat. Although a lot of Sri Lankans are, good listeners, I was not a good listener. But you know how I overcame that? When, especially in the temple, when the monk is preaching, I used to say the same thing in my mind. With him, I'm also saying, I'm also repeating. Then I gradually get in line with the speech, and it comes to a point that I can, without telling, I will be able to just go with his speech, and I just close my eyes and sit in the sitting posture, and then keep listening, and I remember the whole thing. I mean, not word to word, but I remember the summary, the crust of the message that he was talking. So that way you can, because especially when you are listening to a sermon like this, you feel that you are a bad listener. That is because we don't talk about sense pleasure. We don't talk about wars and fights and things like that. Right? If you talk about those things, it will be like a horror movie. It will be like action-packed movie, or it may be a love story. We don't talk those things. If I talk those things, you will never sleep, and you will listen to the whole thing, and you will remember the whole thing. Since we don't talk about those things, our mind is rejecting lack of sense pleasure. Our mind is rejecting lack of ill will. Our mind is rejecting going on the path. So therefore, simply accept the fact that I'm not a good listener and be happy with it. So you can be, whatever circumstances, if you start being happy about being aware, then there will not have anything that can put you down. Make sense?
Yes, it does. And I just have one further thing to say, and that's that I've been living this kind of corporate life for quite a long time. And actually, as a matter of fact, yesterday I decided to resign from my job. And then I was thinking, oh, you know, you were speaking before about the holy life. And I was thinking, I wonder what it would be like to lead the holy life. And then I was thinking, I'd probably be just as miserable if I was a monk, just complaining all the time, just the same as I do in the office. But what do you think?
Give it a go. Rather than making a judgment about it, since you have resigned from your job as well, you should have something to spend your time in. So come to Sri Lanka and live the rugged life, and then see how you can fit in.
It's terrifying.
You can,
Thank you.
there are a lot of monkeys, there are a lot of dogs, stray dogs, and you can have a complete different experience and still become a monk as well.
Not boring.
Not at all.
No.
And it will be melting the whole time.
Thank you very much.
No problem. And have you taken the invitation?
Have you taken the invitation?
Oh, yes, I accept.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Right. Anybody else? Anything else?
Nothing from Brisbane.
Right. Tanuputa, you have anything?
Just have a question regarding the practice. Not a big one, but is it possible to it's regarding the purification of the mind, and I'm just wondering if is it possible to push the practice to a point where your reality starts to reflect it? So is it possible to encounter more difficult people to kind of like test yourself for it, kind of thing?
Encounter more difficult people to test yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Not in the purpose to test yourself, but like you start encountering difficult situations and all that.
Yeah. No, that is very much possible, because in the practice, what happens is we are purifying ourselves. So when we purify ourselves, on one hand, we are depreciating our karma. Right? So to depreciate our karma, if there is anything that you have done in the past, they should come and challenge you and see whether you are still going on the path. So therefore, the teacher says, if your practice is progressing and if you are really resourceful person, you will have a lot of challenges. You'll have a lot of difficult situations.
Yeah.
And I have so many like that. And there were points where I was thinking whether I should continue this life or whether I should take the other way. And there are a lot of such points, but they simply come to test our reliance on mindfulness, test our persistence, test our patience.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a very, very, very relevant question, and it comes. And when it comes, if you can have a smile, and it's of course those things are made more and more. What do you call? The significance is given by not the event or not by the person. Significance is given by the mind. Our mind is amplifying it. Actually, it is nothing. But our mind is amplifying it, and if we can have a smile when those things come up, which means we are mindful, and not only that we are mindful, we are appreciating the fact that we are being mindful. Then all those things simply get sorted out. But what happens is when those things come up, mindfulness will go out the window. So once everything messed up, only you realize that I messed up the whole thing. There was one instance when I was having Dhamma discussion when I was a lay person with my friends, and I
Yeah.
worked up like anything. I got so angry, and I started shouting, and everyone at home or everyone in the discussion
Yeah.
simply locked themselves. And then immediately after 2 minutes, I realized I crossed the line. And then I asked my family to come, and then I went home, and then realized this is still happening. And
Yeah.
it was a huge challenge, and nobody was ready to listen to me after that. And those things happen just to show us that we are still got things to do. And recently, when I was doing a session, and I got emotional on particular incident, and I thought on that incident I will never be emotional in the future. It's something that relates to our family, but that particular point in time I got emotion, and for a few seconds, but still other people were able to see it like that. There are challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have just given some examples that can be given, but there will have things that you can't say. Yes. All right. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much.
no worries, my pleasure. And if there are no other comments, report, questions, we can transfer merit. Can I request Chatu to transfer merits?